it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't follow logically.
Mm-hmm.
That's a dumb example, but you know what I mean.
I do. I think, it's actually Tushar, who's in the chat right now, was telling me something about a study with where they had three different groups of people and they gave them spices and said that there were going to be some pepper testers or something. I think I'm
Okay.
going to probably butcher this, Tushar, so you can say in the chat. And that one group could adjust the level of hotness in the spice. They could all do it however they wanted, make it as hot or as mild as they wanted. And one group was made to play video games where they just played like violent video games. It's a single player game, and those people upped the spice level like a little bit. But the people that really really got mean about it and did like the worst spice level were the people that were PvPing and just got really really mad, I guess, against other people. Hot sauce, there you go, hot sauce. So he could probably explain that better, but I,
So,
I
so the aggression of the game that they were playing PvP caused them to like go
become.
aggro the hot sauce. Did they have some incentive structure where they knew that the hot sauce that they were drinking? Oh, he's leaked it. But cool.
Yeah, well, they knew that the hot sauce would be tested, so they were just trying to see how mean they would be to the testers coming after. Okay, here, let me look at
Yes.
this. I will.
Okay. Okay. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know.
There we go. Technical foul. You can see that. Let's see. But yeah, you can read that.
Cool.
So interesting stuff. Okay, well, how about we talk about the game that you presented at GDC and some of the stuff you're up to as we get ready to close?
Yeah. All right. So the game is called Scale. I should have sent you a demo. Why didn't I do that? Anyway,
Yeah.
it's a sort of puzzly, sort of platformy, experimental first-person game where you can scale objects up and down as much as you want, and that freedom is really important to the gameplay. And I tell people that, and they're like, "Oh, that sounds kind of cool," and they imagine just kind of like making an ant really large or something like that. Um, but I have a lot of things going on that seem to be falling out of this that seem really cool and interesting, and I'm really excited about them. So, for example, my sort of marquee puzzle right now that I show people, which is kind of like the reason to make this game and continue to work on it, is I have a little tiny house in the level, and it's like a dollhouse. And so you scale the dollhouse up, and all of a sudden it's large enough for you to walk into. And so you're walking through this house, and you go up into the back bedroom of the house, and by the bed, there's on a dresser another dollhouse. And so there's like a little tiny house inside the tiny house that you just made large, and you
Whoa.
take that tiny house outside of the large house and put it down because you can carry things, and then you scale that house up, and you go into that house, and in the back bedroom of that house, there's like a little trigger plate that needs to be weighed down, and there are no other objects in the level. So then you have to go outside, scale down the first house you're in, and put it in the position that you found this house that you're now in order to unlock the puzzle. Anyway, so that sort of like nesting and recursion and the ability to manipulate the scale of objects is kind of what the game is all about. And I think it's really interesting. Like some interesting stuff is falling out of it. I'm really happy with how it's going.
I think that's very cool because you have the Alice in Wonderland effect where you have the actual main character changing sizes and going around, but you don't often get a chance to change the objects around you and remain the same size consistently yourself.
Yeah, and there are a few other games that are doing the changing the size of the character thing.
Mm-hmm.
The dilating pupil, Spectre Spelunker, stuff like that. Those games are all in 2D, and I found that you can't really tell if you're in 3D if your character is being scaled up and down or not. Like it's indistinguishable from the world being scaled up and down. But actually, I have a whole world where the world does get scaled up and down, and that's an available action, which I think is it's really interesting because it's so. The dumb example thing that I made was you have this endless desert, and there are videos of this online, by the way, so you can watch this if you want. But you sort of come up to the edge, and there's like this Grand Canyon-like gigantic, channel cut by a river, and then you can't get anywhere close to getting across it, but you can scale the whole world down. So you just like scale the world down until the chasm rather is large enough for you or small enough for you to jump across. Then you can just like leap across it. And what's interesting about that is that it sort of warps time by warping space, because if you try to run across that whole desert, it would take you forever. But because you can scale the whole world down, you can just like scale the world down, take 2 steps, scale it up again, and you're like a mile across the terrain.
That's cool.
So that's kind of where I'm heading with it. You have a kitty back down there.
There's a lot of them. This one's not in my lap. That's all that matters. Okay, so working on that, and you said it's going to be a little while, and people are comparing this to Portal and Minecraft. What's with that?
Oh yeah, well, okay. So I was doing this temporary art style. It's basically simple pixel art textures on 3D objects, and when the video kind of accidentally went when the video sort of accidentally went viral and like IGN and Kotaku and all these places covered it, it was like, oh man, the indies need to stop abusing that Minecraft art style, blah blah blah. And I was
Okay.
just like, whatever, you know. Yeah, temporary art style doesn't really matter. Anyway, so now I have this sort of faceted art style. Here, I'll send you a screenshot. That would be cool.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm
Okay,
looking for questions from the chat room too, so chat room, if
okay,
you have stuff to ask, ask it now.
there you go. I'll put a screenshot into Skype.
Alright, let's see if I can find it here. Alrighty, so while they're doing questions and getting ready for stuff, anything that you would like to let people know, I guess, while we wait for that? As far as stuff you're up to, where to look for you, things you're going to be doing recently.
I'm just going to be trying to be a good developer and blogging about scale more regularly. I feel like I need to push the look just a little bit more before I sort of go wide with the new art style, but that'll be popping up pretty soon. And I would really love to do some kind of crowdfunding thing at some point. We'll see if that makes sense or not. It's kind of interesting because it's a puzzle game, so, you know, a puzzle-ish game.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if it makes sense, because if I give the game away, then it's like spoiling a bunch of the ideas without having sewn together perfectly. It's not like FTL where, you know, I can just tweak and revise it. That's kind of a perfect thing. Oh yeah, there you go. You can put that on there front.
Yeah, it's the same shot I think you showed me, so I figured I'd show your whole website. There you go. Alright, so questions from the chat.
The screenshot that I sent you is pretty radically different from the old stuff.
Here, I'll open
Yeah.
it again. I will open it here, and people can sort of half see it as I drag it across. There we go. Okay. Fane asks, what is your personal process in designing a game from start to finish, and where do you start? I would be interested, too, in this scale. I mean, just from a game design perspective, if you're making an object that's going to change so significantly in size, there must be different design processes for that. I don't know. So anyway, Fane's question first.
Yeah. Well, so there's this book called Rules of Play, written by Eric Zimmerman and Katie Salen, which is sort of the quintessential game textbook. And there's a great, great essay by the famous board game designer Reiner Knizia at the beginning of it. And he has this great line about if you always start in the same place with the same process, you'll often end in the same place. So he always tries to try really radically different approaches every time he designs a game. And I kind of think that's the way to go. But in the specific instance of scale, I just was thinking about ideas for mechanics that would interest me to work on. And I have this problem where I can't just like design a regular game. I just want, like, in order for something to be interesting for me to work on, there has to be something about it that no one's ever tried before. Like, it could possibly lead in the future to some kind of experience that no one has ever put into a game before. And so the scaling thing, it's kind of like, you know, moving forward and backward in time. You know, Braid explored that really well, you know, and so we're just sort of thinking of other things that you can do. And it occurred to me that a simple action that you can do in a 3D modeling program is scale things up and down, and it feels kind of fun and interesting. And so I just kind of took that and turned it into a beam gun that you could do that. And the initial results were really promising. And so then I made this like terrible room escape demo that was very Portal inspired, just because it was for a game jam and I didn't have a lot of time to think about what I was going to do. And so I sort of reflexively just made a bunch of levels and tried to isolate the interesting elements of it and work through the permutations that way. Where I'm heading now, Naomi Clark, I don't know if she works, I don't know where she's working now. She used to work for Game Lab, She's in New York, but anyway, I was in New York giving a game feel masterclass at NYU, and I was showing scale around, and she was like, "Why does it need to be puzzles? Like, why does it need to be levels? Like, it just seems really fun." And I was like, "Oh, right, okay, that totally makes sense. Like, I need to just stop trying to control it so rigidly and just let it be a fun and interesting thing." Because the first thing that everybody does when they open the game up is just try to scale something up as big as they can, right? Because it's just funny and silly, weird and interesting. And so obviously I should just do that, and that should be one of the puzzles. There should just be a star up in a castle in the sky, floating in some clouds or something, and you have to scale like a little tiny flower until it's as big as a 100-story building, and now you're up in the clouds, right? Like that should just be one of the first things that you do because that's what everybody wants to do. So that's not particularly difficult to figure out. Just like the nested houses thing, I've tested it with quite a few people now, and that's just what everybody does, right? Like it's not a complex, difficult to figure out thing, but it's interesting. And so like maybe the whole game wants to be that. So I'm actually sort of heading towards this more Mario 64 kind of structure where I'll turn you loose in a level and I'll give you something to do. You have this list of things to work on, but you can go do all these other things if you want to.
Yeah, rewarded for exploring. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what Rapid Safari does, right? There's all these overlapping combo systems that reward you for exploring the possibility space a lot more.
Yes. Okay, Fuzzy Spoon asks, how would you approach converting a concept in education to a game, i.e., not gamifying an existing model, but remaking the entire model as a game instead? Hmm.
Yes. So this is totally the problem that everyone in game education is trying to solve right now, whether or not they realize they're trying to solve it. And I think a lot of people sort of reflexively grab a game design that already exists and then try to make their concept work with it. Um, I think that's actually the opposite of the approach you should do.
Hmm.
What you should do is learn the material really, really insanely well. Like, you should go just like live with the content expert. So, for the persuasive writing stuff, we were talking to Jim G, who is sort of the foremost scholar in literacy in the world, right? And he was just kicking our asses. He was just like, bam, 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 you're screwing up here. All this stuff is wrong.
Wow.
Rattling off all these names of books and papers that I've never heard before. And it's like, okay, scribble all that stuff down. Time to go read it, right? And that's what I feel like game designers don't often do. It's like we don't respect the fact that these people are professional teachers and academics, and they've thought about this stuff way more than we have. The only thing that we're really bringing to the equation is that we know how to make a game. Now, a game, in many cases, is like a highly complex system, and in order for it to be successful, it has to teach, and so you have to like be able to embed teaching intuitively into a system. So actually, I think game designers and teachers have way more in common than we think. But yeah, the long answer to that short question is basically love the content and then let the content lead you to where the game wants to go. So like for the earth sciences thing, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, what I'm supposed to be teaching here is systems complexity, right? I'm supposed to be teaching these kids that there are complex systems and how to interact with them and stuff. Okay, so the only way to do that is to actually make a legitimately complex system. Okay, so now I'm off and I'm reading 30 articles about water quality and the different things that fish farmers worry about when they're trying to create a successful fish farm, because that will tell me, what kills off fish. And, I'm reading all this stuff about river ecosystems. And so, I'm like starting to design this virtual fish tank with all these parameters that allows you to kill the fish over and over again, let people fail in interesting ways. But none of that would have existed at all if I hadn't just started really diving in on the content. Like if I just try to think of the simplest possible thing or try to think of another game that does what I want to do, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, how does any game get created? Like if you sit down and your goal is you're Sid Meier and you're like, okay, I'm going to make a game about the birth of civilization up through the modern age. Like how do you start designing that? And we actually have a couple, like three really interesting answers to that problem. If you look back when civilization was created, there was civilization, then there was Chris Crawford, who made a game called Guns and Butter. And then there was Danny Bunton Berry, who made a game called Modem Wars. And all three of them were essentially going after the same design space. And you can see like these wildly divergent games that lead in really interesting directions. But all three of them, you wouldn't ever identify them as being the same concept. But yeah, I don't know. So that's the long answer to that.
Okay. I think we're going to get ready to wrap up because You've given
Okay.
me your time generously. We're almost at like an hour and a half. So, a big thank you. And people can find you at steveswink.com or I think at steveswink on Twitter. They're trying to look you up.
Yep.
Okay. If you'd like to leave some
Yeah.
feedback or keep up with the news, you can always find me on Twitter at Gray Area Podcast, and I will actually reply to you, or Facebook/Gray Area Podcast. And if you have not subscribed and you're interested, please do so in the Twitch channel, and there'll be other interviews of a similar nature. But thank you a lot to Steve. It's been awesome.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Internet high five.
Yay.
There we go.
All right. Thank you.